Okay, I'm recording now. So this is just to give a quick rundown for anyone who's checking this out now. Basically, just a really quick story. When all of this came up, I just started like putting every story I could find online and just talking about it. And there was a lot of arguments. And then I kind of realized that I was like flooding my friends' walls with all this stuff, and that can be depressing for people that don't want to see it. So I had kind of like set this group on the side, and then a bunch of people that were interested in it went over there and started watching it there. Um, and now we're kind of sharing stories back and forth. But what I have found is that a lot of us are laymen's. A lot of us are people who are reading everything and trying to understand it. But speaker, we're a lot of us are people who are reading everything and trying to understand it. But a lot of us don't have the background to really properly comprehend it. So I wanted to have conversations once in a while on just a couple of topics. I'm not going to go through everything that's happened that week because so much happens. I'd rather have just a couple of topics with someone who is in a field where they can kind of like talk to us and let us know if like, no, you're way off base, or like, well, yes, this is going on, or they thought that, but then this, just to kind of try to make some sense of it. Um, so just to introduce anyone who's watching, this is my friend Nannette, and I've known her for years, and she's had personal experience with the medical industry, which I won't get too deep into it because it's rough stuff. But there's just stuff that we've been looking at that doesn't seem to make sense to us, and we keep talking about this stuff like, why is this, why is that? And then this is my friend Garett, and Garett is a laboratory scientist. So as we're trying to make sense of stuff, this is a guy who does this for a living, and he's been working on COVID. And he mentioned that, Garett, do you want to say like the kind of night you've had just recently?
Oh, I was telling you guys that I worked graveyard shift last night, and I did about 15 COVID tests that night. Um, so I was busy. We are I work at two hospitals, and so both now those hospitals do the PCR version of that test, which is the molecular test, which is that most the best that we got. There's two types. One is a little bit more iffy. That's why I'm assuming you've seen some reports where like the data is like skewed and hard to comprehend. But the one that we're doing, we're very confident in. Like we validate it. Like we just don't run a test willy nilly. It's validated on a machine that has been doing molecular tests on a whole bunch of different stuff over like a long period of time. So like we can rely on that information to give to our physicians to let them know, hey, this person either has it or they don't.
And the,
Um,
the PCR test that you mentioned that has gotten a little reputation for being sketchy was the one that in South Korea they had the issue that it reads dead coronavirus cells and triggers a positive response, right? And that's why they
yeah,
thought that there was like reinfection going on, but that's actually what was going on.
Yeah, what like for our test, for example, like it looks at two molecular markers, and it's got to be both of them got to be present for you to have COVID. I just did a patient last night where it was presumptive, meaning like it only had one of the two, so I had to repeat it to confirm it, and then it did have both. So it was therefore that particular strain of coronavirus versus just because there's about five other coronaviruses that have been around.
Yeah, yeah. The coronavirus goes back to like 2005 or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's been around. It causes the common cold. It's just um, the protein marker outside of it has changed, and then so therefore it's brand new.
Okay, thank you. Nannette, and I know you just said like you were telling me that you did a bunch of research. I have some of the links to like different articles of stuff that's been going on that makes a lot of this stuff sound questionable. So we can start getting, some of the stuff that we've been told before to some of the stuff that we're being told now. Um, so basically, we're going to get down to these uh, two topics, and I think a big topic that has been in discussion now is people going back and forth on the numbers. I find that a lot of people I find it's like being politicized basically. you know, a lot of this stuff is being politicized, and a lot of people are trying to use it as a weapon, I think, to just like go against the people that are against their side. And if you're on this side, then you say it's all bullshit, it's a hoax, they're just trying to take down our president. And if you're on that side, then you say they're underreporting the numbers, and they're grossly underreporting the numbers, and it's all blah blah blah. So I'm just trying to like not, you know, not like look at like, these are the good guys and those are the bad guys, or those are the bad guys and these are the good guys, and just look at this stuff and try to understand some of this stuff. So
Right. I actually found some numbers, some current numbers, if you want if you want me to lay those out a little bit.
Sure.
As of yesterday, May 23rd, from ABC News, Channel 7, from LA County, we got 44,055 cases with 2,090 deaths. Those numbers reflect 1,032 new cases and 41 new deaths. For Orange County, which would be closer to us, that's 5,157 cases and 130 deaths.
Mhm.
One of the things that I was looking up is the sort of influx with dual citizenship coming in from the border, and there's been a bit of an increase in the hospitalizations. So, you know, as far as the hospitals being flooded right now, the research that I've done is they're very concerned in Imperial County, Baja California area, about the dual citizens coming in from Mexico. One of the Rutter's reports from May 19th was talking about the Central Imperial County, San Diego area hospitals. The El Centro Medical Hospital has 161 beds and 65 COVID patients right now. And the Pioneer Memorial Hospital down there has 106 beds with 28 COVID patients. So right now their concern is the influx of dual citizens coming in.
See, this is already going into one of the topics that I wanted to, actually the first topic that I really wanted to get into is numbers. And what is, like, are the numbers getting overreported, or are they getting underreported, or like what's going on? And I had found two stories that here I want to share right now. So I found a couple of stories where a couple of these like surge hospitals that they had set up, like in Sacramento, where the Sacramento Kings play, a basketball team.
Yeah.
They set up this deal where the Sacramento Kings had their old arena, and they rented it to the state for $1 million, and it went almost completely unused. Like I think at the beginning of the month they had like 6 cases.
Right.
And then there was a surge hospital here in LA where they basically took an old hospital that was not being used, and they opened it back up, and they paid, I think for that one it was $16 million to do it.
Yeah.
And for that one they never had more than 25 patients for the entire
I did
hospital.
hear about that. I did hear about that. You know, all the money that's being spent for these, and granted, you know, it's just, you know, making sure that our hospitals don't get flooded, but the amount of money that's being spent
Right.
to ensure that these hospitals are available and they're not being used. You know, we're talking about upwards of millions and millions of dollars for these hospitals to be on the ready, and they're not being used. And I frankly cannot see why.
Well,
I mean, other than the fact that they're not clearly not needed.
Yeah, well, something that I found interesting too is that I heard from a friend of mine that her hospital is they are flooded, but what she's seen is that they're not actually flooded with COVID patients. They're flooded with counseling, and with people that basically need counseling. Now, I've heard different things, so I don't, because I have another friend who's a doctor at a hospital at Kaiser, and she's saying that they're flooded with with COVID, but over here I'm hearing that, and with the whole counseling thing, you get into, you know, in San Francisco, a doctor said that their hospital has seen more suicides in the last 4 weeks than they normally see in a year, because of the CNN had a special where they were, or a report where they were talking about death of despair. They were talking about the all of the suicides and all of the overdoses that were happening and that were still expected to happen because of people being locked up inside and the psychological stress of isolation. And they're actually expecting 75,000 deaths of despair throughout this whole thing. So with the whole thing with the numbers, Garett, since you've been dealing with a lot, I know you've been swamped because you're dealing with this nonstop. Are you guys seeing like the numbers that you were expecting, or are you guys seeing actually more or actually less? Because to me, I just look at this stuff and my layman mind says, well, they're not, if they're closing all these places, then they're not getting the numbers that they were going to see. But I'm not there. I'm not working on it. So you, as being someone who is working on it, what are you seeing?
What I'm noticing, like, did you guys see the video of that Bakersfield interview with those two physicians?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So they were representing data in Bakersfield, and every county or every part of Los Angeles, because we're so big, is going to have a different scenario.
Okay.
I work at a LA hospital, and I work in Palmdale, which is part of LA, but it's not in the heart of LA. Whereas
Yeah, it's on the outskirts, basically.
where you know Glendale is. I haven't working too much at Glendale because I'm just only per diem tech there. I'm as needed, and they finally just got in-house testing, but they've been swamped sending things out. In Palmdale, we've had positives, and Palmdale is so isolated that we are prepared, so to speak, for that influx. Like we have an isolation room on every floor because we have to be prepared for that influx. So what I'm noticing right now is we are not bombarded. We have the capability to treat patients. We've had like these little ceremonies where people who get infected and get discharged, like we have like a little ceremony for them, that they're on their way to, happy health. And so every part of LA is going to have their own situation, whether it's like a big influx of just the COVID or a big influx of mental health because of the lockdown scenario. And ultimately, we all know why we shut it down was to make sure that we don't have a supersede.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I
deaths.
think it was very understandable because we had no idea what it was.
Right.
We had no idea what it was. All we saw was a spread in China. So in the beginning, I think that it was like, okay, let's find out what this is and keep everyone safe until we know what it is. And right now we're in a position where like LA, which is such a major city, and it's like the money that moves through here, the money that people depend on, for their livelihoods, where stage 2 is now, the projection date for that is 4th of July.
Yeah.
Which means that we don't start easing into stage 3 until after that. And that's pretty far off. That means we have to go finish off May, go all the way through June before we even get to that.
Yeah.
So with the numbers, the stuff with the numbers, some of the stuff that I've seen is that it seems like the CDC is kind of like, they did a turnaround because a lot of the information, obviously, like, we're finding stuff out. So some stuff you might think it was this, and then you find out it's that. And so the CDC recently said, and I've got it over here somewhere. Here, hold on, let me share screen. So the CDC acknowledged mixing up coronavirus testing, and there was another one. I can tell you what they are though. There was two major things that I noticed. First off, that the reason that numbers were still kind of coming up as far as new infections, where they were like, oh, look, these are still on the rise.
Yeah.
Basically, they started doing this vast antibody testing. And they were doing antibody testing all over the country. And they were saying, this is to try to figure out how long this has been here and how wide the infection was originally. But it wasn't that big. It was a lot more than what they thought it was going to be. Like in Santa Clara, they were expecting 1,000 out of 2 million, and the numbers that they got were something like 41,000 to 81,000 or 87,000 out of 2 million, which out of 2 million, it obviously doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're expecting 1,000, then an average of 55,000 means 55 times more.
Right.
But so what they were doing though, and now they're like, oh shit, we shouldn't have done that. What they were doing is all of the antibody testing, they were registering them as new infection cases. Like these are now new cases of infection that we know. So instead of like saying these are now just added to the total infection, they were actually being recorded as new infection. So people thought that infections were still on the rise because of like antibody positives. And another thing, well, let me see.
Do you have a general number about the of the CDC reporting of deaths right now? Do you know that?
I can bring it up. But
Yeah.
the other thing I was going to say was that originally, when the CDC first started sending out tests, we now know, and they have acknowledged that this happened, that the test that they bought from China came in seeded with coronavirus. So there was a ton of false positives.
God.
And there was a bunch of people that got put into like quarantine, and there was a bunch of people that got put into the, the whole system out of false positives. And the CDC has acknowledged this now and said this was from the manufacturer. We got jacked up tests from the manufacturers. So it's like the test numbers now, there's like, it was sketchy in the beginning because of that whole like beginning with seeded test.
Mhm.
And now there was another level of sketchiness, not sketchiness as in evil, but just sketchiness as in mistakes, where there was this whole antibody testing, which was for a good purpose, but then the way that the numbers got put in, it made it appear that there was new infections. So you kept hearing like, oh, infections are still on the rise. We can't back up. We have to keep this going.
Right.
So that was something that I also wanted to ask Garett, just because you're dealing with numbers and you're looking at what the projections were and what we've seen. Do you, like, as far as LA, they say we didn't just get it under control. We completely got it under control.
Right.
How do you see this as far as like all of the things that we found out with numbers and where we're at right now? Do you think that it is safer to just kind of like, hey, a month won't kill us if staying locked down for another month, just kind of like make sure we get this all right, let's just do it for one more month? Or do you see it as like we should just kind of like start easing people back out?
So I remember when you shared your antibody, sorry to put you on the spot, but
Yeah, no, it's all good.
I read the whole thing, and
Yeah,
I don't like that antibody test.
Yeah.
It's I could easily see why it screwed up data, because it's really not a confirmatory test, because like even in the fine print, if it says positive, it says non-confirmatory.
Right.
Like you still could have been infected with a different coronavirus strain. So it's not like, this equals COVID-19, which is what we need right now. That is what the numbers need to represent, not maybes.
Right.
Antibody test was doing that. And so like I could see why, if it's a maybe, where do we put the maybe in the scaling? And on my opinion, it shouldn't even be there. So that test gave a lot of false hope. So I don't really care for that test. So with opening up, for example, I believe it's really got to be like, I like how the governor was like, we want to set up this criteria. But I don't like that it's going to be like mandatory for all areas.
Right.
So what I noticed, I have a friend that lives in Kern County, which is just right up the street from, Palmdale, because like past Palmdale, you step into Kern County, which would be Rosamond, entering Bakersfield, stuff like that. They're opened up. Like they have met the criteria, so to speak, that the governor would like, and they've met it. So now they're opening up. Like my friend just shared a picture of her, getting her drink at a bar.
Oh, nice.
So
yeah.
I feel like driving out there now.
I mean, I see, and you're talking about the variance in numbers from county to county. I guess it would ever be the closest to, Bakersfield, San Bernardino County. Right now, the cases are 4,315 with 176 deaths, but Ventura County is 912 cases with 30 deaths. Mm-hmm. So you see the range in each county, how it could be different. And so the idea of that every county is going to have their cases are going to be different. And therefore, I think that each county needs to essentially create the rules for reopening, because the counties are just so different in terms of numbers and cases.
And what are their numbers representing? Like I said, if they just threw in the antibody test and that just skyrocketed your values, and those values aren't really definitive on like you have it or you don't, then like that's crap.
Right.
So like those numbers aren't really, solid in information.
True
So
numbers, yeah.
Well, just another example of the same thing you were saying, which is I think an extreme example. There was a story. Uh, there was a story about Modoc County, where they were, when originally, before putting up like stages. Right now we have the 4-stage thing. Originally they had just said these are 6 things that all have to be in place before we open up, and that was like for the whole state.
right.
And Modoc County is a place that has, I think it's like 9,500 residents, and they had 0 infections and they had 0 deaths. So they were like, why are we locked up? Why do we have
Right.
like, so they were fighting this whole thing, and they kept not loosening the noose on them. They kept holding them tight. And it was one of those things that I kind of saw, like you're saying, you have to take this, you can't treat them the same as you would treat LA, because LA
Right.
is such a big county with
Right.
so many residents and so many people. Just the amount of people creates a risk that you would have to like take into account and take care of a lot more than a place where the entire county has under 10,000 people and has had 0 infections and 0 deaths.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
I think it's not sustainable in terms of like having rules for every county makes more sense than having rules for the entire state.
Yeah.
Makes it, but what applies to Los Angeles County isn't going to apply to Bakersfield.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's the population, it's the risk factor. I mean, we're coming up on summer and just what that would entail.
Mhm.
The risk factor changes with the change of the season. So,
Now, something interesting with what you're saying, Summer. I saw Dr. Rhonda Patrick do this interview where she's talking about how much they're looking now at vitamin D deficiency, and that like the people who have vitamin D deficiency seem to be the people who are affected the worst by it. And that was another one of those things that I just kind of looked at, like the stay-at-home orders as being counterproductive, where she was saying like the best way to get vitamin D is to get sun.
right.
That's the number one best way to get vitamin D is to get sun. So when you tell people don't go outside, it's counterproductive.
Right.
And now obviously if there's like a mass infection going on, and as soon as you step outside you're going to get infected, well then okay, great, I can understand that. But there's been all this other stuff now where the CDC is now saying that it doesn't like, you're not going to get infected because you touched a surface where someone else touched, where before they were saying that it can exist on a surface for up to 14 days, indoors for up to 14 days, and outdoors because of the sun only 20 minutes. But that's a new thing where they're like, oh no, wait, they've kind of gone back on that. So
that's
there
quite
is
quite a different change, and from 14 days to never mind.
yeah.
It's really, the hard part right now is navigating the data and navigating what what's being reported daily. I mean, it seems to be changing daily.
Oh yeah, it's going to be changing all the time. Like like when you look at flu numbers, that is since fucking, sorry my language, 1918 till 2020. That's a lot of information that we have established that are accurate. This bad boy hit us at the beginning of the year, possibly a little earlier, maybe like late 2019, but
they're saying late November, right? That's why it was the 2019, because it might have happened like in November.
November.
Right. So, like this is going to be a catch-up game for a long time.
Well, what's funny with the just stuff that I sometimes, like some of the rules that come out seem kind of arbitrary, and me and Garett had talked about before the wearing your mask outside rule, where it's when it's like, and I know some people are going to get mad at me for saying this, but like I haven't been wearing a mask outside. I take my dogs hiking. I actually I'll bring a bandana like in my back pocket in case like the park rangers come up and say something to me, but they haven't yet. So as long as they haven't, I don't do it. And in stores, you have to, because it's their rule. So if you want to shop in the store, you do. And one thing I've noticed is that being out on a hike where like half the people are and half the people aren't, the people who aren't keep the hell away from each other.
Yeah.
And being in the store, I was in the grocery store yesterday, and everyone, it was like, I was going this way on the aisle, this lady's going this way on the aisle, this big, tall, huge guy came right down the middle, and sneezed right between us, like
Oh,
shoulder to shoulder.
good
And
God.
you know that this whole time I've been the guy who has been like, it's bullshit, it's bullshit. And I'll tell you, I flinched. I fucking, excuse my language, I fucking flinched. When this dude was shoulder to shoulder to me and sneezed, I just like, oh, Jesus, dude. You know, and it's just like when people put that thing on, is they just forget, like they think I'm safe, you're safe, we're all good. And everyone's like, you go into the grocery stores or you go to Target or you go to the Home Depot or all these places that are open, and you see people in like little huddles. And it's just like, they just feel like, well, I got my shield up, so I'm good.
It's a false sense of security for sure. You know, the idea, I think we're more conscious when we don't have something wrapped around our face to really keep some sort of distance. And, you know, it's great. You're outside. I mean, really, how many people are you seeing right now outside? And then if you are passing them, you're not going to be right in their face. You're going to be a bit of ways away. So I think the idea of face masks outside, it just creates a false sense of security. And I think, you know, the idea that all the other health issues that it can cause, you got to weigh out what is best for you. And, you know, seeing people work out with face masks drives me crazy. Your body is getting the oxygen it needs, you know, you're breathing in your own CO2. It drives me nuts. It absolutely drives me nuts.
Yeah, my sister sent my nephew out on his bike wearing a mask because she thought it was a safe thing to do, and he came home and threw up. After that was like done.
Your brain, your body is not getting the oxygen it needs.
I saw there's a scientist, well, he's not really a scientist, he's a science educator, I should say, and his name's Kyle Hill, and I love that dude. And so he shared something about that I didn't think of, and he relayed a graph about this whole concept. And obviously, you know, Fred and I, we've had this discussion with other people that the ingress of it coming into you, right, like it doesn't really protect you. Like medical grade stuff, yes, but like the face cloth. But what Kyle was talking about is the egress, what's coming out of your mouth. That's why we've been doing that to don it for like the dude that just sneezed and you had to flinch. If that person had that type of just something over his face, you probably wouldn't have flinched. So,
no, he did. He had something on his face. But
he did. Okay, but still, like that.
But he was right on me. That's why I was like, shit.
Yeah. So like, but that in general, like that's the purpose of the reasoning why. Like I didn't think of that. Like I was like thinking of more like, because obviously it's not an airborne virus, and one of the cloths is not going to protect you from something airborne, right? Like you'd have to wear like the medical grade stuff, but the actual purpose of it is not really for that. It's to prevent a lot of
The particles.
That from a sneeze, from a cough, from because like I'm sure you've all had that experience where you're talking to someone and they just kind of spit
a little bit.
Yeah, like that is a prime example of what that is helping for. So I am location dependent. Of like when I'm outside with my dog hiking, I'm shirtless, so I'm getting my vitamin D, and I don't have a mask because I'm around nobody. And the sun will kind of like, if something comes out of my mouth from breathing or whatever, it's going to fall to the floor. No one's going to breathe it in. No one's going to get
around it. And the sun will kill it.
The sun will neutralize it. So, but in the stores, at the hospital right now, we have to wear one just to get in the building. But when I go to the lab, I'm not forced to wear one. Thank God, because wearing them 24/7, I do not agree with. Like that is the counterproductive part where like people are passing out, from CO2 inhalation. So I think it does serve its purpose, but it's got to be like, you got to be smarter about it. It is going to build a false sense of security. People are not using it the way it's supposed to be using it. But I don't like say, oh, it's bullshit.
Right. No, because that's what I noticed while I was hiking, that like I talked to this couple that had a puppy at one point. They had masks, but they were just wearing them around their neck. They didn't have them up, and I wasn't wearing one. And we were like 15 feet apart from each other. We're like, hey, oh, that's a cute puppy. But because we weren't wearing them, like everyone who's not wearing them there's more than 6 feet, way more than 6 feet. Everyone's like, just like, we're doing our thing over here, you're doing your thing. But yeah, in the grocery stores where everyone's got them on, like they just think that's a free pass. You know, that's where I'm like, this guy who just sneezed was on me. Like he's big dude, came walking right between two people and sneezed right between them. Where I'm like looking at his mask and I could actually, I know I was imagining this, but I was like seeing like cartoon fumes coming out of the side of it. You know, like, oh Jesus. You know.
The air turned green.
And the funny thing is, I think for a while now, when I was looking at the mortality rate, I was kind of like, you know what? Who's got it? Let me go get it. I want to go get it and know that I got the antibody and be done. And then all of a sudden, when I was in the market and like this dude sneezed right next to me, I was like, oh, geez. Like, oh, keep that death away from me. Yo.
Yeah, it's true. It's a false sense of security, most definitely. And, you know, for people that have, you know, anxiety disorders and things like that, this is just having something over your face just heightens it all. And, you know, the idea of, you know, people and their anxiety, you know, attacks starting all over again, and just, you know, the mental health aspect of what that can do to your mental health. And when you're talking about less oxygen due to wearing masks, when you're talking about, you know, the anxiety and fear that is being perpetuated by these ever-changing data and things like that, I think that that's going to have a psychological effect going forward for sure, and create a lot more mental health issues that we're going to start really seeing come up.
So let's move on. I want to not keep you guys too long. So the other topic that I wanted to get into was the deaths of despair, and all right. So we've touched on this already a little, but one of the things, and I was just bringing it up just to check it and make sure. So there, 15 million children have emotional and psychological issues already in America. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of doctors are saying that being locked up at home is making that a lot worse. So that and the stuff we were talking about, like, you know, in San Francisco, that they're saying, one hospital is saying they've seen, in 4 weeks, they've seen more suicides than they see all year. You know, and the psychological stress of staying home, and the media that seems to be really kind of like, how can we scare the hell out of people? Yeah. Like I think that a lot of the media, like a lot of the people that I see kind of like, I just heard that that you can get it if somebody sent you something in the mail and this and that, and like whatever the worst horror story is like what goes viral and what goes, and you know, and if you tell people like, well, no, I've just read this thing that says that this doesn't happen, they're like, no, that's, you know, and this is an echo chamber. You know, obviously I think everyone does this. Everyone looks for confirmation bias. Wherever you believe, like the narrative you kind of are already with, you see those articles and you save those and you bring those up, and the stuff that doesn't go along with your stuff, you kind of just go, all right, they're kind of probably full of shit. So I think that's normal for people to kind of do confirmation bias. But yeah, just to, we already touched on it a little, but just to touch on it a little bit more, the fact that as we come out of it, now you keep hearing the words, the new normal, the new normal, the new normal, which is like, it seems like they want.
There's a bit of programming going on.
Right.
With the idea of the new normal. It seems to be there's some programming happening with that, unfortunately.
Kind of getting used to the thought of like, you know, it's like Fauci said, you should never shake hands again, which I was like, then, you know, like a month later, he said random sex with strangers you meet on Tinder is still okay. And I was like, but let's not shake hands. But let's not shake hands though.
Right.
You know, because
you
know, hey,
don't get corona, but HIV is cool.
Yeah. So, you know, it's this stuff where it just seems to me like the psychology of it, like and you know, again, like I'm trying to reel myself in, because my mind is just like, come on, let's move through this, let's get past it, let's go. But I also understand where people are saying like, we're this deep in, if keeping us, you know, a little bit longer gives us peace of mind, then great. So at this point, like, do you think that it's better to give people the peace of mind of like, hey, we're easing out of it. So as we come out of it wearing masks and we come out of it doing this and we come out of it doing that, you know that you're safe? Or is prolonging the isolation making it worse?
I personally think the isolation could most definitely make it worse in terms of the fear and the anxiety. Are we truly going to be able to slowly get out of this? I've talked to people, and things like the sleep patterns have changed for a lot of people due to the anxiety of fear of essentially the unknown right now.
Teenagers are just staying up all night because they can. I read an article about
Yeah.
that too. Yeah, because they can. Yeah, teenagers are on
Yeah.
Netflix and playing video games.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that too. People that aren't able to work right now, their schedules are out of whack. You know, I mean, it felt like the month of March literally felt like it was 3 months. You know, you lose all sense of time. You know, and I come, trying to get back into some sort of normal routine. You're not going outside to exercise. So you're not burning, the energy that you would need to sort of bring yourself back down from a stressful day of just worrying and watching the news and things like that. So I think there's definitely some mental health issues with staying indoors and having the lockdown be even prolonged for another month. I really see that it's kind of borderline on some danger in terms of mental health issues.
Garett, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm ready for things to open up in a way that works for that community. So yeah, I'm all for that. Like if we are prepared to treat the influx, that's all we can really do. And so the detrimental effects of isolation, of losing your job, not being able to provide for a family, not be able just to do the normal things, like we already have a sense of what prison feels like, so to speak. I mean, not that way, but yeah, no, it's that isolation is totally, detrimental over a long period of time. That's why, like, there's, even in prison world, like you get to go outside, you get to exercise, you get to, have a social period.
Right. In prison, the worst thing they can do to someone is separate them.
Yeah.
In a place where you're surrounded by killers and like the worst people in the world, the worst thing they can do to you is take you away from them.
It's being used as a punishment. I mean, isolation is used as a punishment.
Yeah.
So when you think of it like that, you're like, whoa. That's how they punish inmates.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever offenses they've done inside the prison. It's like, oh, they get isolated as a form of punishment.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, like I said, I mean, I think it was understandable in the beginning when we had no idea what it was. When we had no idea what it was, and I think in the guy who gave us the original projection was like, what's his name, Neil Ferguson. This guy said it was gonna be like 2.4 million dead in America.
Yeah.
And the thing is that that projection was already saying that we were going to not take any precautions. And we had already started taking precautions. So that number was already wrong to begin with. But then if you look at that guy's past, that guy said, how many people he said were going to die from the swine flu and how many people he said were going to die from the bird flu. That guy has been consistently wrong throughout his whole life. So, we had that guy as the reason that like the world started like locking down. And then now he's actually had to step down because it turned out that he was out there doing stuff. He wasn't locked down. So like,
Yeah. We're taking his data as the Bible, and it's not even, thank goodness, not even come close to what the original projections were going to be. With that 2 week, the 2 week where everybody was essentially locking down to flatten out the curve. I mean, they were projecting between 150,000 to 250,000 deaths. And I'm thinking in my head, do you know what actually would have to happen for about 10,000 people to die each day? Something catastrophic would have to happen in our healthcare system for 10,000 plus people to die every day for 2 weeks.
Well, that would also be a domino effect, because imagine that many dead. Like, what would you do?
Right. I mean, essentially, we thought there was going to be dead people on the streets the way they were making it sound.
Yeah, I remember Gavin Newsom said that by mid-May we were going to have 25 million dead in Los Angeles County.
Right. which was, it shocks you into like, whoa, what is really going to happen? And then it did, thank goodness, it didn't happen. And it's like, okay, so what are we using now to continue to extend these lockdowns? Are they really using science? Are they really using data? And if so, what kind of accurate data are they getting?
Right.
Because numbers are changing on the daily.
Well, the CDC now is now going to actually investigate LA County's numbers, because they're apparently, I think they're doing it as a weapon because LA is staying closed longer, and the White House wants to like open them up. So the CDC is saying we're going to come in and look at your numbers. But when you look at Colorado, the health the health director in Colorado caught criminal investigation for falsifying numbers, and her response was she adjusted the numbers down and said, yes, there was a problem, but there's no reason for criminal investigation. There was a problem, we fixed them. And there was a coroner in was it in Pennsylvania that came out and said, hey, I saw the numbers before they went out. They added another 240 right here. And like after they said that and they went in the media, they had to adjust that down.
Right.
The coroner said, I saw the numbers, I sent them up. These numbers are not right. And they adjusted the numbers down and said, oh, that was a mistake. So, that's where it starts to make you wonder, and like, I know this is me putting on a tinfoil hat, but that's where it makes me start to wonder, are like numbers getting inflated? So when you hear that, like, for the CDC was saying anything that has the symptoms.
The presumption of infection, yeah. I mean, those are pretty broad guidelines.
Right, without a test positive.
Without a test, yeah.
Because without a test positive, well, basically any pneumonia case can fall under the guideline or under the presumption of COVID. Without like a test, actually, there's lots and lots of stuff that you can say, like, these are enough to like say, yes, go. I mean, a friend of mine told me about his father-in-law died, he had liver issues because of a lifetime of alcoholism, and died recently because of his lifetime of alcoholism and the liver issues. And when they got the paperwork back, it said COVID.
Yeah. I mean, dying from COVID versus dying with COVID are two different things. And I think that's being inflated, and that's where you're getting these inflated numbers, unfortunately.
And that's been something that people are saying, that anyone who dies, if they were asymptomatic, and then you like find out like, oh, they also had COVID, it's being marked as died of COVID.
Yeah.
So that's the stuff where, I just start wondering, like, the numbers, like, is this all, and like I said, I don't want to go there because I know this is tinfoil hat time. Like, are the numbers getting beefed up to like drag this out, or like what's like, could we audit this at some point? Could we audit this and say, like, okay, if there was no test, not presumption, don't give me presumption. If there was no test, then we can't call it COVID.
Then we can't call it a COVID death, yeah.
Like, for example, when I had that presumptive positive on that patient, I had to repeat the test. It's either yes or no. Like a doctor doesn't want a maybe when he's going to, operate on a patient. Does the patient have this, or do they not?
Well, especially when they were looking at the possibility of putting people on ventilators, because that's such a basically a final step.
Right, that's the extreme. Yeah.
So
so are you seeing any post-death testing happening at all? By the way, I'm kind of curious on that, because I could understand if they say the assumption is this person died of COVID, but we're going to go ahead and do the test and find out if that's, how are you guys verifying, if there was no test done prior to death? Are you doing anything post-death?
I haven't had to experience that just yet, because with death, they're going to do an autopsy and they're going to do a further investigation. And that obviously takes time to figure out. But I do know for certain that, the whole concept of causation, where like, coronavirus does not cause death. Ebola does. It's not very infectious, but if you get it, you got a death sentence. It used to be that way with HIV too, but now like the treatment. But with this particular virus being an upper respiratory virus in general, it can do damage, or won't, depending on your immune system.
Mhm.
And so those that are dying, eventually we start to learn that they had some other type of health issue.
Right, all
Yeah.
the pre-existing
And
conditions.
Their immune
like
system
that.
is compromised, and then COVID just did not help the situation.
Right.
But that will be the case if you catch a cold and you're immune compromised. It'll be the case if you have a flu. You know, the comorbidity stuff, that should be its own separate data versus just
Right.
trying to include that into the, oh, it's a COVID death. No, it's
Yeah.
not.
Right.
Well, that's actually something. When I was looking at the CDC numbers, there was COVID deaths, and they were always lower than what I was seeing like on CNN and all that kind of stuff. And then I'd look over and it said pneumonia and this and COVID. And I was like, well, these are the high numbers. I was like, what do you mean? Like, this doesn't say like how, you know, it was a little bit like, all right, so these are the numbers from COVID, and what exactly is this? You know,
Right.
it seemed kind of like hazy, like it's like a few different things. Like all these numbers are these three or four different things, you know?
Yeah, I'm also, one of the things that I found interesting in the numbers and the updated numbers is we have obviously new cases, new deaths, but what's not being updated is the recovered.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I find that very interesting. No recovery numbers are up at all. So you don't have anything to sort of compare to, you know, and that's, I find that very interesting right now, especially all the counties in California aren't reporting any numbers of recovery.
Do you guys look at the John Hopkins data?
I've looked at it. John Hopkins has had some recovery.
Yeah, like that's the only main source that I know that does show
Right.
recovery in comparison with death and infection. Like everyone else, every other news outlet's just one of those two things: death and infected.
Right.
You know, doom and gloom. But like
Yeah.
John
Yeah.
Hopkins will say,
Yeah.
hey, but there's also this recovery. You know.
Right. Yeah. So when I was looking up the counties in California, I saw no recovery numbers being reported at all.
All right. It's been almost an hour, so I don't want to tie you guys up for too long. Garrett, I know you've been up a long time. Thank you guys for doing this. I'm gonna put it up on that group thing. Just this is why I wanted to like get it down to like two main topics, because at first I was like thinking of everything that's been going on, and I was like, oh, and then you know the woman who said that she manipulated numbers, and then they found, or that they said she manipulated, and then you found out that she was a sex stalker, or you know, like I was just like hearing all of this shit. I was like, let's talk about all of it. And I was like, nah, let's just have a somewhat intelligent conversation about like one or two topics instead of like, you know, just all of the mayhem and everything that's been going on. So thank you guys for doing this. Once it's up, I'm going to like, you know, put a title on it and tag it and put it on everything. And once it's up, I'll send you guys the links. All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Guys.
Sounds good. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you. Bye-bye.